Welcome to NRL Offside. That's Noz. I'm JC. Oh, wait up. Stuff that one up. But I think this is going to be the theme of today's show is Stuff Up's going to be talking about it a little bit later on in the Grapple for our 23rd episode. But, Johnny, we are actually going to mix things up a little bit this week. So people have been telling us our intros have been a little bit stale. So, mate, we're going to bring the outro to the intro this week. And I'm going to start by asking everyone to subscribe. So your listening platform, if you're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, whatever you're on, guys, just go to the bottom, click on the subscribe button. It'll make sure we hit your feed on Wednesday every week. Also, and we were talking about this last week, Johnny, it's a very exciting development for NRL Offside. Mate, we are now on the social media. So if you're an Instagrammer, if you're a TikToker, make sure you get onto our pages. At Instagram, it is at NRL_offside. At TikTok, it is at NRL Offside. We've had some great content go up over the last 7 days, Johnny. We're starting to interact with our audience a bit more. So, guys, make sure you are checking out the social medias in between the programs. But, Johnny, mate, that's not the only thing we're actually mixing up this week. We are going to bring Vox Popping to the front of the program as well. So we actually have a vintage Vox Popping to kick off proceedings. And, mate, this one dates all the way back to March. And it was from one of our most reliable correspondents, Johnny Croak. Now, Croak actually wrote this after our third episode. An observation: given the 10-minute increase per week in each episode, I have calculated that the grand final preview episode should run for 6 hours and 24 minutes. Looking forward to that one, boys. Well, Johnny, the good news is that since those heady days, we've sort of stabilised the program. So we are kicking in now at about the 40-minute mark, give or take a few minutes. The bad news is that with everything happening in the NRL at the moment, we probably need 6.5 hours to get through it all. Maybe we could probably spend 4 of those hours trying to work out what in God's name is going on in Tiger Town. Maybe we had that meeting last week. Everybody come out singing from the same songbook, Happy Families again. Then the Tigers came out and with Parramatta put on the worst half of football I think I've ever seen. Mate, it's seeming like what's coming out of Concord at the moment, it's like The Godfather, but everyone's Fredo. That is incompetents who actually think they're big shots. Mate, but that wasn't all. We also had Super Saturday, a.k.a. Slaughter Saturday, a.k.a. the Night of the Long Knives, when 3 contenders took 3 pretenders behind the woolshed and absolutely sliced and diced them. We've got the story of the week now. Mate, I don't even know if I want to mention this because I know you'll be rambling about it during the program, but that was the Roosters' historically significant annihilation of the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. And, mate, we had news come through today that Matt King has been appointed as the New South Wales Origin coach for 2027 and 2028. So, Matt, as always, again, just plenty going on in the world of the NRL. But fear not, listeners, we will get to all of that. We'll try and stick to our usual timeframes as well. Before we do get into the meat of it, though, Johnny, what have you got for us, mate?
Yeah, g'day, Noz, and hello, listeners. Look, mate, all good on my side, mate. I'm actually still on a high after that Roosters demolition of the Cowboys, which look, I didn't see coming to be honest. So I'm really looking forward to your take on it shortly. Look, just on a much sadder note, as everyone knows, I've got a real soft spot for anything Italian, sport, food, culture, the lot. So I was really saddened to hear the passing of the great Franco Baresi, the legendary captain of the great AC Milan sides of the 1980s and 1990s during that golden era of Serie A. I'm talking about football here, or soccer. Just a little bit of background. Franco played an incredible 719 games for his beloved AC Milan. Mate, he was the ultimate one-club man and captained the Rossoneri for 15 years, which is pretty enormous loyalty. Mate, this guy will be forever remembered as one of the greatest defenders the game has ever seen. And if you've not heard of him, I recommend everyone Google him, because the great Diego Maradona once said about Franco Baresi, he's the greatest defender he ever faced. So you can't get a better compliment than that. So on that note, Vaio Franco Baresi, riposa in pace il capitano. And, mate, let's get back to the NRL. And, yeah, over to you, Noz. Take us up for the first big hit up.
Well, mate, before we do get back to the NRL, there's another thing. Speaking of all things Italian, mate, we had another tragic loss Mate, with the passing of Vincent Pastore from The Sopranos. Mate, we've lost El Capitano, we've lost Pussy Bompancero. Mate, it's been a very tough week for the green, white and the red. But hopefully we can bring a smile to all those Italian faces. We've got our usuals this week, Johnny. Speed round, what caught our eye, round preview, vox popping, the grapple. I mentioned this, I alluded to it at the beginning of the program. Mate, we are now into our 23rd episode. And it is the perfect time for us to go back and look at all of those things that we have gotten hopelessly wrong. So maybe 6.5 hours won't be long enough. And freeballing, mate, freeballing comes back to you this week. Mate, I've seen the notes, and listeners, it is great. I would just really, really encourage you to stick around for that. It is a fantastic segment. But Johnny, it's that time again, mate. Grab the rails.
I feel the need for speed. Ow! I feel the need for speed.
Cowboys versus Roosters. Well, let's start with this. 82-12. 82-12. Mate, this Roosters victory was the third biggest margin in the history of top flight rugby league being played in Australia. Mate, it was actually a throwback to the time when games were played on inner city dust bowls. Players wore those brown leather headgears, and mate, you literally had to screw your studs into the bottom of the soles of your leather boots. Now, here at NRL Offside, Johnny, we like to look at things in terms of being glass half full, glass half empty. Mate, for the Chooks, the glass was overflowing. It was an absolutely masterful performance. Teddy, Rob Toya, Marky Mark, Cody Ramsey, Reece Robson, Nafahu White, Victor Radley, just, mate, everybody who donned the red, white and blue. And how about our man Sam Walker? Mate, this was a throwback to the early 2000s performances of, dare I say it, the great Andrew Johns. Mate, he was an unholy combination of the ultimate puppet master and an attacking wonderkind. Mate, this was his stat line. Just take a moment to contemplate this. 3 tries, 3 try assists, and 12 goals. And probably the most impressive part of the performance, Johnny, is James Tedesco, the Chooks' best player. But he wasn't even on the paddock for the second 40 minutes. He was on dressing shed goggle box. Now, in terms of the other side, mate, the glass was smashed on the floor and the shards were embedded into the Cowboys' kibers. Mate, they gave up 14 tries. It probably should have been 15 or 16. Mate, they skewered their top 8 hopes, but more than anything else, they absolutely embarrassed themselves in a way that they will not live down for a while. Dragons versus Dolphins. Now, I look back on last week's round preview, Johnny, and I called this a Leyland P76 versus a Ferrari. Well, mate, on this particular night, the Leyland had the engine of a Ford Falcon, and the Ferrari, well, mate, it had a few transmission issues. The P76s, that is, the Dragons, gave the prancing horses, Dolphins, as much as they could handle in an end-to-end encounter that went right down to the wire, or as close as down to the wire as St George can muster in season 2026. In fact, it was only a late drop ball that tanked St George, and even then, a 77-minute Ryan Catchman try made things a little bit too close for comfort for a Dolphins team that never quite clicked into gear. Storm versus Bulldogs. Well, on paper, this game looked like it was going to be a cakewalk for the Dogs, especially when Jerome Hughes accepted a late invitation to sit on the second tier of the Melbourne coaches box with Harry Grant and Cameron Munster. But Johnny, games are not played on paper. No, they are played on buffalo grass. Mate, this was an unexpectedly great encounter. The Dogs brought their hard-nosed defensive mentality, sprinkled with hitherto unseen glimpses of attacking flair. On the other side of the ball, mate, the Storm got inspired performances from their young guns, including a resurgent Trent Tolau, an emergent Hayden Watson, and a transcendent Suafau-Longo. Alas, after taking the lead early in the second half, the Melbourne Young Guns got regulated. The Dogs ran in 4 unanswered tries in the last 30 minutes to take the 2 points. But the silver lining for the Storm is that they show that there is life beyond the big 3. Titans versus Warriors. Oh, God, we're going to start the Mea Culpas here, Johnny. Last week, I spent probably way too long giving a rap to the Titans' spine. Well, mate, last Saturday, they were literally spineless. Mate, they may as well have had me, you, my annoying cat that walks around and meows at inopportune moments during the program, and Pussy Bompensero or Francesco Baresco, but they might as well have had those guys playing in the 1, 6, 7 and 9. What a no-show from the Gold Coast. Mate, on the other hand, the Warriors, well, they use their skill, their mobility and their size to roll to a workmanlike 36-point win, which essentially gets their train back on the track for season 2026. Unfortunately, as with most other seasons, the Titans can't even seem to find the station.
All right, mate, let's go to the Panthers versus the Raiders. Look, the Panthers were back to their clinical best with Nathan Cleary putting on another ball-playing masterclass. This was a timely return to form by Penrith after a pretty scrappy month, and no doubt, obviously coincides with the finals just around the corner. These guys clearly remain the team to beat. The Raiders, on the other hand, they were hugely disappointing, making far too many errors, and really Penrith just made them pay. And what about our mate Milky Jenkins? Scored another double, taking his season tally to 28 tries. This guy now has 12 doubles in that total, and there's actually a big chance to break Dave Brown's record of 38 tries in a season. Unbelievable. Let's go to the Broncos versus the Knights. Mate, this was an impressive win by Newcastle, which keeps their finals hopes well and truly alive, despite obviously Dylan Brown and Dylan Lucas out due to injury. Mate, the Knights were in control for most of this game with Fletcher Sharp starring again and scoring a great individual try. As for the Broncos, look, we've commented on this a few times. That what a disappointing season it's been for them. This is a team that just lacks a lot of confidence, and right now, the end of the season just can't come quickly enough. And mate, here's a crazy stat for you. We've spoken a lot about Tigers and Tigerland in the last few weeks. Do you know that the Tigers have actually won more games, 7, than the defending premiers this season, who've only won 6? Ouch. Wow. All right, let's move to the Sharks versus the Rabbitohs. Look, mate, South started well the first 20 minutes or so, but then the Sharks got into gear and absolutely dominated the last 60 minutes. This is a Sharks team that is, mate, they're going along very nicely, and there's a lot of talk about these guys being the real deal, genuine premiership contenders. On results, winning, I think winning 9 of their last 10 matches. You can't disagree. And you throw in the form of Nico Hines and Trindle, who have probably been the best halves combination in the comp this year. Mate, Sharks fans have every reason to believe. And their forwards, I think, are also doing a great job. They're very fit, quite mobile, and they seem to be always holding their own. And, whatever they call that stadium out there, Ocean Trout or whatever their new Sharks Park ground is called, it's definitely becoming a fortress for them because they very rarely lose at home. All right, let's go to the Tigers versus your Eels. Look, after all the drama during the week with Adam Doueihi, mate, it was almost a case of cometh the man, cometh the hour, as Doueihi single-handedly dragged the Tigers back into the contest with a brilliant solo try before calmly slotting a clutch field goal to put his side in the front. But look, it wasn't to be with the Eels fullback Iongi scoring the late match-winning try to break the Tigers' hearts and unfortunately continue their losing streak.
Mate, that West Tigers Parramatta game, I'm going to be talking about it in a moment, but it should have been turneth off the TV. Mate, in terms of other action, oh God, I really know what you're going to be talking about here, JC. Mate, I almost regret throwing to you. But what caught your eye over the weekend? I'm going to regret this, aren't I?
Look, you sort of hinted at it before, but look, Nos, I said it in the intro. I still can't wipe the smile off my face after the Roosters, absolutely demolished the Cowboys up in Townsville. And you mentioned before, it was the performance of Sammy Walker that really caught my eye, especially with all the contract talk swirling around him, 5 years, 10 years, 1.5 million a season, etc. Mate, he played a sensational 80 minutes, which, as you mentioned, included a personal points tally of 36. But here's the part about Sammy's performance that really, really grabbed my attention. It actually happened early in the game where Sammy put a grubber kick into the Cowboys in goal, and he thought there was a genuine try on. Marky Mark didn't chase it with his usual intensity, which was a bit strange. But then you saw Sammy give Marky Mark an absolute bake for that effort, screaming out, "Mark, Mark," a few times. Now, look, some people might see that as maybe a bit over the top, but from my side, I saw it a lot differently. To me, it really showed exactly where Sammy Walker's mindset is right now. He wants to win every single play, win every opportunity. And I think maybe that origin experience has probably further matured Sammy. And when he speaks, clearly the team listens. So, mate, go Sammy. I really hope, mate, this is the year he leads my mighty Roosters all the way to the big dance in October.
But as you get older, there's just little things that annoy you. And one of the things that drives me bonkers with a capital B, is when someone makes a terrible play, like a knock on or forward pass, and all their teammates go over and pat them on the back or tap them on the head. Mate, I would much rather see the bait that Sammy Walker gave to Marky Mark than that. It just, I mean, Jamie Lyon used to be great at it at Manly. It just means it holds you to account. Now, what caught my eye, Johnny? Mate, I, along with many other Eels, Tigers, indeed rugby league fans, endured one of the worst 40 minutes of football ever played in the West Para game on Sunday afternoon. Mate, it actually reminded me of the great Rosie Perez quote from White Men Can't Jump, which incidentally is one of the 5 greatest movies of all time. Sometimes when you win, you really lose. And sometimes when you lose, you really win. And sometimes when you win or lose, you actually tie. And sometimes when you tie, you actually win or lose. Winning or losing is all one organic mechanism from which one extracts what one needs. Now, do you know what I extracted from Sunday afternoon's game, Johnny? A 3-hour episode of indigestion. Mate, I just cannot fathom how Jason Rolls and Benji Marshall felt following that. It was just ghastly. Oh, well, let's move on, Johnny. Let's move on to something a little bit more positive. Well, not really. Mate, I mentioned that this week in the Grapple, 22 episodes in, mate, we are going to have a Mea Culpa edition. How's that for a bit of vocab expansion, Johnny? Mea Culpa. Mate, it is the perfect time to look back and see what things we have gotten completely wrong over the last few months. So now to kick off with you, what do you got for us?
All right, I had to think about this. So look, I've made some clangers. There's no doubt about it. So, mate, here's a few shockers from this season. Obviously, our first crack at this podcasting business. My beauty was I somehow said that Daniel Tupu played his junior football for the Parramatta Roosters. Mate, I'm really not sure where that one came from. I probably just plucked that out of you-know-where. My other big one was I tipped the Melbourne Storm to finish second on the ladder. Safe to say that prediction hasn't aged too well. Now, this one here created a lot of controversy and a lot of angst amongst our Bulldogs boys in the school chat, where I predicted the Bulldogs would miss the top 8. Now, look, to be fair, I reckon there were stages during the season where that looked pretty good call, but I reckon in the last sort of few weeks, maybe I've got that call a little bit wrong, and yeah, there may be a better chance of making the 8. But let's see. There's still another 4 or 5 weeks to go. I did tip the Blues to win every Origin game. Look, we got the series, but I probably got a little carried away there, and we all know what happened in game 1. We were pretty lucky to win that one. And then, and I think you also said what I'm about to say. After the Tigers' bright start to the season, I may have even declared they'd make the top 8. So, let's just say that one didn't quite go to plan either. So they're probably my half a dozen clangers for our first year of this podcast, mate.
Mate, I like the fact that at the beginning of that little section, you said I had to think about this. Mate, I was at the other end of the spectrum. I didn't have to think about it at all. I had plenty which instantly came to mind. And
Sure.
mate, your ones are minor boo-boos compared to some of my ridiculous hot takes. How about the West Tigers winning the comp? How about Trent Robinson being on the coaching hot seat? Mate, those ones have actually gone in the diametric opposite direction. It's fascinating as to how wrong they were. But, mate, that wasn't my biggest stuff up of the year. My biggest stuff up of the year concerns Victor Radley. Now, Johnny, this one concerns you as well. When you named him in your New South Wales Origin team, mate, I said that he wasn't even in the top 3 back rows at the Roosters. Now, mate, his performance in Origin, particularly in games 1 and games 3, proved that completely wrong. But just to absolutely show how wrong I was, mate, I think we need to look at Radley's 2026 in the context of his career. And it is a pretty interesting exercise. Now, you've lived through the Victor Radley years, Johnny. You've probably enjoyed most of them. Maybe haven't enjoyed some of it. But, mate, he burst into the scene in 2017, and, mate, he was literally like a missile. Mate, he well and truly earned that nickname of the Inflictor. He was able to influence games with his defence. He came on to the scene, and quite frankly, some of the hits he put on were fantastic. But, mate, there was something else about Victor Radley in his earlier days. He also had some ball playing in him. Now, he wasn't quite Cam Murray. I mean, no one really is. But there was a conversation as to Murray or Radley. Again, I always went for Murray. I think he's a better footballer. But Victor Radley was right there, and he had that creativity in his game. Mate, then we had what I call the Radley lost years. Yep. Now, after they won the competition, after the Roosters won the competition in 2018 and 2019, a couple of things happened over the next few years at Bondi. We had Boyd Cordner and Jake Friend, the two leaders of that forward pack. They had to retire prematurely. And Victor Radley came under the somewhat malign influence of JWH. And, mate, he was trying to walk that fine line between lunacy and leadership. Now, JWH could often do it. Blokes like Sam Burgess can do it as well. But Victor Radley completely failed. Mate, there was a 12 to 18-month stretch where it seemed like he was either getting sin-binned or knocked out every second game. Mate, there was actually a period of time when it legitimately looked like his career was in jeopardy. And again, let's call a spade here, Johnny. He didn't help himself with some of his off-field issues either. But this year, mate, he has turned it completely around. And I'm going to be man enough to admit that I made a massive mistake here. Since he came back from his ban for whatever his ban was for, I can't seem to ever quite work that out. Mate, he's really tempered his aggression. Mate, he can still influence a game with his defence, but he is not a liability when it comes to his discipline. Now, I've got this question for you, Johnny. You talked about this earlier in the season in one of your sections. It is a season of record sin bins. They've actually slowed up a little bit. It'd be interesting to look at the figures over probably the last 10 weeks. But we certainly started off with a very hot pace of sin bins. Mate, how many times has Victor been sin binned this season?
I reckon 0.
Mate, none. And not only that, he hasn't even looked like he's going to be sin binned. So, but that's a remarkable turnaround in terms of his discipline. And, mate, more encouragingly, he's gotten back to a more skillful ball-playing role. Mate, this has been a really interesting aspect of his game. On Thursday night's game, the very, very first try that the Roosters scored, which was Teddy, mate, Victor Radley was responsible for it. He threw this beautiful right-handed pass just as he was going to hit the ground, went up to Reece Robson. Robson subsequently set up Teddy. Mate, that's what we want to see from Victor Radley, and that's what he has in his game. Now, I don't think he's been the best Roosters forward this year. I think Nafahu Whaat has actually been the standout for that Roosters pack. But I think Radley has been the most influential, and he really has been a leader. So, Johnny, again, mate, I am going to stand up. I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say that I royally stuffed that one up. Okay, now speaking of royal stuff-ups, mate, we are on to the round preview. So let's see how we go. Johnny, do you want to kick us off?
Oops, I've made a bit of a clanger here, mate. I just realised the first game, Titans versus the Cowboys up. I didn't write any notes, but look, it's okay. You wouldn't say this is a round of the game match. All right, let's have a look at this. Cowboys, well, we know what happened last week. They got an absolute hiding. And then the Titans, what an idiot. I tipped the Titans versus the Warriors, and they also got a hiding. So, mate, why don't we call this the battle of the last week's hidings? Look, there's only one team that has something to play for here, and it's the Cowboys. I know they're playing in the Gold Coast. If the Cowboys want to cling on to some sort of Finals 8 chance, mate, they just have to win. So I'll tip the Cowboys, not with much confidence, but you'd like to think they would turn up for the 80 minutes as opposed to what happened last week. So, yeah, I'll go the Cows.
Mate, for someone that actually didn't look at this game, that was a very reasoned analysis. And, Johnny, I've got no reasoned analysis whatsoever here. But I've got an idea for Toddy Payton in this one. But I think for this game, you should wear a toupee in the coach's box. But just bear with me here. I've got some rationale behind this. So, you know the common saying that coaches actually lose their hair when things actually happen? Well, mate, Toddy doesn't have any hair to start with. So if he starts with his toupee, then he's got something to lose when the Cowboys put in their inevitable shocking performance. And mate, if anything, it'll actually send a message to his team. I don't know if you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Homer was wearing Tom Landry's hat. Mate, it can be like that. Now, here's my vow, Johnny. If Todd Payton does wear a toupee, I'm going to tune in for the game. If he doesn't, I'm not going to tune in. I'll probably do something else. I don't know, vacuum my carpet or do my taxes. But I'm just going with the Titans. They're playing at home. Who cares about this game? They're both hopeless, these two hapless Buffaloes.
All right, let's go to the Warriors versus the Panthers. Look, I reckon this, mate, this should be an absolute beauty over in Auckland. Both teams are coming off impressive wins, and the battle up front, I think, will be worth the price of admission. But look, whenever Nathan Cleary is on the field and he's in your team, you just feel he's going to be the difference. Mate, he's coming off another masterclass last week and just has that uncanny ability to control the tempo of a game, whether it's a tight grind or the Panthers are rolling downhill. So I just think Penrith will be way, way too strong in this battle.
Mate, the first game was completely inconsequential, mate, but we are talking with this one. Mate, this is the Battle of Stalingrad, or maybe Mount Smartingrad. Mate, this is two heavyweights in a game that's going to have a real influence on the competition. Mate, I actually like the Warriors in this one. Yeah, they actually won big last week. Wow. It was against the Titans. But, mate, they showed that they're just getting back to what they're good at, and that's that real sort of bash and barge game. They've got so much size and so much mobility in that pack. Mate, the Panthers won in a training run against the Raiders. I actually think, and this is just sort of based on what I've seen with the Panthers over the last couple of months, I think they're going to struggle against the size and mobility of the Waz. I know they played, and Penrith played a little bit better with Cogger in the team. They finally got Blaze Talangi off that left edge, so it wasn't comedy capers in defence on that side. But, mate, I just saw something in the Warriors last week, and I think that they're going to trouble the Panthers enough to get the victory.
Okay, stay tuned. Let's move to the Storm versus the Seagulls. Look, I've got to give the Storm plenty of credit for their performance against the Bulldogs last week. Even though they ended up losing the game, they had a side full of young players, and many of whom I'd never even heard of, and they more than held their own. That effort should give Melbourne plenty of confidence heading into this clash. As for Manly, mate, I've got to ask the question, what the hell has happened? Not long ago, they looked like a certainty to play finals, but they've completely fallen off the perch. As you know, I've been calling them fizzball of late, and it's well and truly alive. And the Seagulls just can't seem to stop the slide. So I'm tipping the Storm to get the job done down in Melbourne.
Mate, this is a really interesting game. I've spent all of our episodes of NRL Offside, but it's probably been the better part of 20 years hating on the Storm. But, mate, I really enjoyed them last Friday night. Mate, that youth movement, they just came out and it was just one of those games that had a real sense of irrepressibility about it. But I'm sort of hoping that Jerome Hughes doesn't play this week because I want to see a little bit more of young Hayden Watson. I thought Trent Talau was great last week. In fact, we saw an element of his game that we haven't seen up to this point. And Suafau-Longa, mate, I don't know who he's actually eligible for the World Cup, but mate, if he was eligible for my nation, I would snap him up as quickly as I could because he's been phenomenal this season. The Seagulls, mate, again, truth-telling time here. Mate, they're wrapping fish and chips for the rest of the season. Mate, they are yesterday's news. I think the Storm are actually going to beat them as well.
All right, let's move to the Dolphins versus the Broncos. Look, this is big brother versus little brother. Although, based on this season, you'd say that the Dolphins are a big brother now and deservedly so. I'm done talking about the Broncos' disappointing season. The Dolphins, on the other hand, they've generally been playing with a lot of confidence and have been one of the competition's best stories all season, led by Hammer, Katoa, Herbie, Nikorima. So I think the Finns will be too good across the park, and I think they'll win this one comfortably. So the Finns by plenty.
Mate, I'm going to echo you here. Mate, bad Broncos teams always get way too much coverage. I'm going to keep this brief. The Finns.
Well done. Let's move to the Rabbitohs versus your boys, the Eels. Look, I was nearly going to call this one a nothing game. And maybe it is. But look, The Eels got the 2 points last week, but as you said, it wasn't pretty against the Tigers. South, as I mentioned, started quite well against the Sharks, but they were just never able to stay with Cronulla over the full 80 minutes. The big difference here in this game is motivation. South are still in the top 8, and every game is pretty crucial for them to really cement their final spot. Parramatta, on the other hand, they're just basically playing for pride. I think the Rabbitohs should get the job done. But I won't be surprised if Mitchell Moses and the Eels spring an upset. But I'm still going for South. Just.
Mate, I'm going to speak really clearly about this game. Both of these teams are hopeless. Mate, South's actually, mate, you called me for it last week. I keep calling them pretenders, but mate, they just burnished their pretender credentials last week against the Sharks. And I've got another one. I've got a question for you here, Johnny. Mate, the Rabbitohs have played 4 games against top 8 opponents this year. How many have they won?
0.
No, they've won 1, which I was actually surprised about. Mate, again, pretenders. Mate, Parramatta, on the other hand, mate, they decided to test the theory that the West Tigers are the worst team in the competition last week. And based on that second half, it was a split decision. I'm going for Souths. Mate, I'm going for it based on the matchups. Mate, that left edge of Souths has always given Parramatta problems. That's the only reason I'm going for them. I think both of these teams will just come out and they'll make mistakes. They'll be inconsistent. They'll have lapses. I think that left edge will get Souths over the top. But, mate, as with last week's West Parramatta game, I think there'll be parts of this game that make us want to put our eyes out.
Jesus. All right, let's go to the Raiders versus the Knights. The Raiders, they were very disappointing last week. And that actually really surprised me, especially how well they've been playing over the previous month. They just made way too many errors against Penrith, and you simply can't afford to do that against the best teams. The Knights, on the other hand, look, I thought they bounced back in style, even with a couple of their key injuries. They're playing with some confidence, and obviously Kalen Ponga is leading from the front. Fletcher Sharp, as I said, he's been outstanding for many, many weeks now, and I reckon him and Kalen Ponga will be the difference again. I'm expecting it to be a tight, say, contest in the first half, but I think Newcastle's class will shine through after the break. So Knights for me. And if they do get the chocolates, don't be surprised if Ricky Stewart gives the post-match press conference a miss. He won't even turn up.
Mate, I liked in the lead up to last week's Penrith Raiders game, everyone was talking about the miracle of Mudgee. Well, mate, on Saturday, the Penrith Panthers turned that into the massacre of Mudgee. Mate, the Raiders came thudding back to earth in a big, big way. Now, the Knights aren't necessarily the Panthers, but they are coming off a pretty solid, bordering on spectacular performance against the Broncos. Yeah, it was the Broncos. But, mate, I think their combination of forward mobility, attacking spark will just do the flat-footed Raiders in. I think the Knights are actually going to hit this one quite comfortably.
All right, let's go to the local derby, the Dragons versus the Sharks. Look, mate, once upon a time, this local derby was one of the big games on the calendar. Yeah, just not too sure it has the same feel in 2026. Look, to the Dragons' credit, they were courageous against the Dolphins last week. They did get a few tough calls go against them. Probably a bit unlucky not to push the game even closer. Whilst the Sharks, as I mentioned before, they've been the form team of the competition, especially over the past sort of 8 to 10 weeks. Nico Hines and Braden Trindle are playing outstanding football. The Sharks forward pack is dominating most of their matches through the middle. And I really think their bench has been making a huge impact every week as well. So Cronulla will be way, way too strong, and obviously is still eyeing out a top 2 finish is still very much on the line for them. So they'll be highly motivated. So I think the Sharks will win comfortably in the local derby.
Now, we talked about the Titans-Cowboys as the first game of the round, and I mentioned the fact that I wouldn't even bother to walk across the room to turn the TV set on. Mate, this one's different. Whenever St. George play the Sharks, mate, local derby rules definitely apply. It's always a willing game. Both teams, regardless of their position on the table, they turn up and they put in. But I think the important thing to remember here, Johnny, is that the Sharks are one of the best teams in the competition. And the Saints are probably the worst team in the competition. I think the Dragons will make a bit of a go of it. They've been good at that over the last probably 4 to 5 weeks of football, but, mate, they won't come close to winning. I think the Sharks will continue their role. It'll be tough, I think, for the first 25 to 30 minutes, but the Sharks will just grind over the top of them.
Okay, mate, let's go to the game of the round. My Roosters versus the Bulldogs. Look, I'll start by saying this should be an absolute cracker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting a huge, huge crowd at Allianz, and I really can't wait for this one. There's been, lots of confident sledging by our doggies friends in the school chat as well. Look, the Dogs scraped home, let's be honest, against an undermanned Storm side last week, whilst the Roosters, it's been pretty well documented what they did to the Cowboys. For the Roosters, I keep saying this every week. If we hold the ball, keep our errors to a minimum, I really don't think there are many teams that can stop us. When we complete our sets, mate, our attack goes into overdrive, led by Teddy, Toya, Sammy Walker, and the freak himself, Marky Mark. I think for the Bulldogs, they'll definitely have a different game plan for the Roosters. I really think they're going to try and bash us through the middle, slow the game down, and try to sort of knock us off our rhythm. Pretty much what they did to Penrith, if you remember earlier in the season. Mate, as for my tip, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going all in. Wait for this. Roosters by 30. And as we say in Italian, I'm putting my palle, which is balls, on the line with that prediction. Bring it on.
Oh, mate, I love it. Mate, the Chooks are definitely favourites here. Mate, the way they played last week, they'd be favourites if they were going up against Thanos. Mate, but these dogs, there is just something about them, mate. They've definitely turned corner. But I think they can actually test the Chooks, especially if they can trick them into an arm wrestle. Mate, they've shown a little bit more fluidity in attack. People are talking about the impact of Crichton going into 5'8". Mate, I also think it's got something to do with Burton finally getting back to the centres. Mate, he is a centre. He gives them a lot more attacking punch across the three-quarter line. Mate, I actually think the Roosters polishing the outside backs will be too much for the Dogs. But 30, mate, I think you might be in that typical Johnny style, going a little bit over the top. The Dogs might bite them, but I think the Roosters will actually get them in the end. Okay, now I am excited about this, JC. I mentioned in the introduction that you've got a great free balling section for us.
'Cause I'm free balling, yeah. Free balling, ooh, free.
Okay, let's go. What have you got for us, mate?
All right, Noz. Look, you know me. I'm a sucker for NRL stats, records, and a little bit of rugby league history. But is it just me? Because seriously, 2026 just feels like it's been the year of records. It feels like every second week some milestone is being broken or some incredible feat is happening. So here are a few that have really stood out to me this season. As I said, there's been quite a few, and there's probably a lot that I've missed as well. But here's a few highlights. Not in any particular order. I'll start with Thomas Milky Jenkins. Mate, what a season. As I said earlier, this guy's already racked up 12 doubles. He recently broke Reece West's Penrith try-scoring record for the year. And now is within striking distance of Dave Brown's all-time single record of 38 tries. Mate, I reckon he's a pretty good chance of getting. He's currently at 28, so he's got 10 more to go. So go Milky Jenkins. Nico Hines on the weekend just equaled Nathan Cleary's consecutive goal-kicking record of 32. He now has 3 more to go to break the record held by Hazem El Masri. That could happen this weekend. Let's turn to last year's grand finalists, the 2025 grand finalists. Who would have predicted both the Broncos and Storm would miss the finals this year? Even more remarkable for Melbourne, I think it's only their second time a Craig Bellamy coach side has failed to make the finals. And if I'm wrong, that might have been the year when they lost their points. But either way, it's only the second time. You mentioned it before, my mighty Roosters 82. Cowboys, not many. As I said, I didn't expect them to pile on 82 points, and it's the highest score we've seen in decades. As you mentioned, it was way back in 1935 when the record was set, which was 91. Okay, you remember at the start of the year, Alex Johnson became the try king. We were all there when he surpassed Kenny Irvine's all-time try-scoring record, and that was a special moment. Mate, the scenes at Allianz that night was something that I'll never forget. Now, the Blues just recently won another decider at Suncorp. New South Wales have won deciders in Brisbane before, but never after losing Game 2. So that actually made this series victory even sweeter. Daniel Tupu, as we all know, recently joined an elite club, one club legend for the Roosters. He became the 5th player to play 300 games for my Chooks. And also we saw that same feat for Jason Taumalolo, who also recently reached 300 games with the Cowboys, another one club great. Mentioned Sammy Walker's 36-point masterclass. That's one of the big records. I know it's a record for the Roosters. And then I want to mention our good old mate Latrell Mitchell's injury heartbreak. Now, I don't know if this is a milestone or if this is an achievement, but it's definitely becoming quite consistent. Mate, this guy just doesn't play enough games for South. I think he's only managed 8 or 9 or maybe 10 this season, and he hasn't played since. And there's a lot of talk going around that he may not play again this season. Just not good enough for a guy that's on, $1.2 million a season. And then I'll finish with something that has definitely been topical of late, and it's Jerome Luai's mega deal. Mate, as you know, Luai signed what's reportedly the richest contract in NRL history, and then you've got the Pepsi commercials on top of it. Mate, as I said last week, that's something that just doesn't sit right with me. So, yeah, that's my list of records broken this season, milestones achieved, and some pretty amazing moments in season 2026. What do you think of that?
Mate, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I do have a minor quibble, Johnny. You mentioned that Latrell missing games was a record, but I'd actually contend that it's more like business as usual. But I did like the fact that you managed to get your weekly dig in at Jerome Luai. I want to make sure we continue that momentum for the rest of the season. Okay, Now we have reached the outro, guys, and we are going to have another dash at Vox Popping. And I have to give a shout out to a couple of avid listeners. A friend of mine from work, Greg, and his lovely wife, Elsie. Now, Greg, great bloke that he is a bit of an NRL enigma. I do think he's a Sharkies man, but I'm not entirely sure. But I do know about Elsie. She is a dyed-in-the-wool Eels fan. Mate, she actually sent this message to us via Instagram last Friday. Someone check on JC. What a result for the Roosters. Better hope our beloved Eels get up or it's going to be a rough pod for Noz this coming week. And I wrote in return, no, JC is probably best off being avoided this morning. As for the Eels, if we can't win this one, ... Well, I think this program's actually proven that. We've all seen what Johnny's brought about the 82-12. And Elsie, in terms of the Parramatta performance, just refer back to what Rosie Perez says. Anyway, big thank you for listening. Always great to hear from our listeners. You got anything for us, Johnny?
Look, not much for me, but look, God bless Elsie, and thanks for thinking of me. I really appreciate it.
Now, we've come to the end of the program, guys. It's been another wild and woolly ride. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Remember our feedback. Remember our email addresses. We've got jc@nrloffside.com, noz@nrloffside.com, so send through your thoughts. We also mentioned our Instagram and TikTok handles, guys. So we've got Instagram at NRL_offside, TikTok at NRL Offside. As mentioned, we're starting to throw up some content between programs, so something to whet the appetite, sort of keep the wolves from the door. So make sure that you are checking our accounts regularly. But as always, guys, we very much appreciate you guys coming in and joining us for this week's episode. Let's look forward to another great week of football and also look forward to seeing you guys for next week's program.
Stay well, listeners, and catch you next week.